All right. Hey, everybody. Today I'm interviewing my friend Sam. Different culture, and we're gonna go ahead and get started. Okay. All right. My first question that I have for you today is based on your own experience with healthcare. What do you think of the U.S.'s healthcare system based on access to care as a whole?
Yeah, so based okay, so I'm not the most knowledgeable, but based on my experiences and based on what I've heard, word of mouth, I feel like there are two strong challenges facing a lot of Americans when it comes to accessing healthcare. The first one is definitely just geographic barriers. So that means in certain communities, especially rural or um, disenfranchised communities, there is definitely like a either a lack or just subpar services to, you know, healthcare access. So that means like hospitals might be, poorly funded or might not have all the resources they needed. And sometimes even if there is not a hospital, some people all they have is maybe like a single practice or perhaps like urgent care, but not enough, for a comprehensive evaluation. And then the other barrier I can think of is definitely economic barriers. So that means people might not qualify for certain insurances like Medicaid or Medicare. And there's also the challenges with people's employers, not offering medical plans like dental, medical, and other plans, as well as jobs not paying enough so they can even afford, private insurance. And yeah.
I like your answer.
Well, thank you.
All right. So next, based on your current residence, are you able to get the most appropriate amount of medical care you need on a frequent basis?
So, fortunately, I can pretty much, access medical care when I need it. Of course, that is largely dependent on, the government, since I am a recipient of government assisted, you know, need. But in terms of, like I said, geography, I'm in a good location. I'm no more than I would say 20 to 30 minutes out from at least a hospital, emergency department, urgent care, private practice, a dentist, or any other, services that I might need.
Okay. Thank you for that. For our next question, could you please describe to me a time where you were unable to seek proper medical treatment due to high cost or lack of availability of providers?
Yeah, so it was not, okay, so let me preface this. It wasn't necessarily a matter of life or death, but it was more so just a matter of inconvenience, especially like conflict with work policies requiring a doctor's note. So recently I had like some sort of illness. I think it might have been the flu or some sort of respiratory infection. But when I called to make an appointment so I could get that doctor's note for my employer, I was unable to get an appointment until 3 days in advance, which would have been way long into the
Mm-hmm.
future for said note. And so as a result, I had to just find other, practices or locations, which fortunately I was able to find urgent care. But the wait time for urgent care or any, medical providers is a discussion that can be had at a different time.
Sorry that happened to you. That's horrible.
Yeah.
Um, okay, so for our next question, based on your experience, do you think that healthcare providers are respectful of your culture and individuals and other individual cultures?
Yeah, I would say pretty much. They practice a lot of, cultural sensitivity. Particularly, I do come from a predominantly, English speaking background and in a Christian household. So I'm not affiliated with like a marginalized or a minority community, but I mean, so I really have no position to speak on this matter that pertains to this question and answering it truthfully. But from my limited perspective, then yeah, they pretty much, practiced medicine, respectfully.
Okay. so for our fifth question, if applicable, could you please describe to me a time where you felt dismissed by one of your past medical providers due to cultural differences?
So again, going back to the last question, coming from an Anglo-Christian household, I really haven't had any explicit instances of cultural insensitivity.
Okay, all right. For our next question, what feedback could you provide for healthcare personnel in order to properly serve the different cultures found in our community today?
Yes, so I would say the biggest thing is definitely language barriers. So I remember one time I went to my my doctor's office
Mhm.
just for, I think it was like a checkup or something, and there was a gentleman who was attending at one of the front desks, and they were having a problem communicating with the receptionist because I believe he spoke French or like Haitian Creole, some sort of language with French, influences. But the problem was, obviously, due to the limited number of French speakers, um, he really wasn't able to get a smooth or a very efficient delivery of service. And so what I do recall is they had to get someone like on the phone,
Mhm.
and I think they were able to resolve it, but it did take like a while. Like getting for him to get access to even an interpreter took way longer than me walking in, talking to the front desk and then sitting down. That took shorter time than this man just getting an interpreter. So circling back to the main point, yeah, definitely access to different languages, and that includes, the predominant ones in the triad area.
Right.
So Spanish, Arabic, Chinese, Tagalog, of course. But I mean, just any language. I feel like there should always be a translator on hand, and it doesn't have to be on site. Like ideally, that would be the case, like in a perfect world. But considering fiscal limitations and demand, I think the best realistic option would be to have one at least on hand, like from a different location, like so on the phone, and also not excluding sign language. That is also another thing that should be addressed. There's also non-verbal languages too.
Okay. For our seventh question, could you please tell me more about how your culture feels about mental health awareness practiced through therapeutic medicine?
Yeah, so I think from my background, I think mental health is generally like taken care of. It's like we we do care about it, but kind of like most things nowadays, there is a vocal minority of people who might have more extreme or adverse reactions to, mental health, and especially like treating or coping with mental health. So it's generally a positive outlook on mental health. So
Okay.
yes.
All right. For our next question, do you use any traditional medical treatments from your culture? So, for example, like herbal medicine or something like that. If so, could you please provide me with an example?
So when it comes to alternative medicines, I would say that from my background and also me personally, I wouldn't really like use alternative means for treatment as a primary source of treatment, more so than just like a supplemental resource. So, for instance, I know a lot of people from my background love to engage in things like, like tea and um, like yoga. So basically, a lot of alternative treatment plans the from continental Asia as well as Europe. Like I know that's a very popular thing.
Mhm.
But all in all, I think it's more so just like a secondary thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So for our next question, what are the greatest limitations your culture experiences regarding access to healthcare services?
Mm, I think coming from considering my economic background and my current standing, um, when it comes to the entire economy, I think my biggest concern, or the biggest problem facing, people in my position, would definitely have to be the reliance on government assisted healthcare, or Medicaid and Medicare, because while that is greatly, such a lifesaver to an extent, the problem is due to a limited amount of funds and a lot of patients, including myself. um, I do I do recall that at some point, and this goes for other services as well, like Social Security, that at some point there will be too many patients but not enough funds, which means people might start getting less service, less appointments, less quality appointments, and that goes to the institutions that they attend as well. So that means hospitals and clinics and urgent cares might also be impacted due to government budget cuts and whatnots. Um, so yeah.
Okay. All right. And for our last question today, what are some adverse implications people in your culture experience as a result of limited access to healthcare services?
Well, going off of what I said about the last question, when it comes to people not being able to access enough or as high quality healthcare, there is definitely the adverse reaction of people getting sicker, people not being able to heal either sooner if ever. So that could be getting access to certain medication, to certain surgeries, or even seeing a specialist. Because I heard that seeing a specialist takes a lot of more time and effort in the system than it does than just seeing a generalist, like a family doctor or a pediatrician, for instance. And there's, of course, so yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you for your time today. I think we're pretty much good. Let's go ahead and.
All right, thank you.
Alright, so this is my second interview for my cross-culture interview project. Today I'm with Brian, who is a current Versailles Tech student whose aspiring goal is to be a sonographer. He's from the same heritage and background for me as well. So let's go ahead and get started. Based on your experiences with healthcare, what do you think of the U.S.'s healthcare system based on access to care?
In my experience, access to care isn't too great of an issue for most Americans, particularly those living in our area. For the most part, access to healthcare is fairly abundant in our area. For most medical issues, there isn't a significant wait, and as far as setting appointments or receiving referrals, it's actually quite manageable for the most part.
Okay. So for our next question, I have, based on your current residence, are you able to get the appropriate amount of medical care you need on a frequent basis?
Living in Kernersville, I would say yes. I mean, there's a doctor's office every mile. And, same with dentist office and so on and so forth.
I could agree with that, especially living in Kernersville myself.
Yeah.
Okay. So for our next question, could you please describe to me a time where you were unable to seek proper medical treatment due to high cost and lack of ability in providers?
Yeah, sure. There was a point where my Medicaid lapsed briefly, and I was unable to receive dental care for an issue that I was having. But that didn't last that long, so I couldn't imagine living my life up to this point without any insurance, as some Americans do.
Right.
So, yeah.
Thank you for that. Okay, so our next section is on your beliefs about doctors, hospitals, and healthcare providers.
Okay.
So, based on your experiences, do you think that healthcare providers are respectful of your culture and other individuals' cultures?
Yeah, well, I can only speak from my experience, but I've never really experienced anything where I would say that I was being discriminated based on my culture.
Right.
That's never really occurred to me. I don't doubt that discriminatory practices do occur, to some to some individuals, in marginalized communities and so on and so forth.
Thank you. Okay. For our next question, if applicable, could you please describe to me a time where you have felt dismissed by one of your past medical providers due to cultural differences?
It's hard to say whether it was because of cultural differences, but I could detail a time when I felt dismissed. I was having some back pain, after my back surgery, a few months after, and when I went, I don't really feel that I got the attention that was warranted by what I was experiencing. So yeah, that's one example where I felt a little bit dismissed.
Okay. For our next question, what feedback would you provide to healthcare personnel in order to properly serve the different cultures found in our community?
I would say to healthcare professionals to be respectful to everyone, regardless of culture, and regardless of cultural background. I think it's beneficial to everyone, if there's a standardized medical treatment standardized across everyone.
Okay.
I don't think it should vary.
Okay. Thank you. For our next question, could you tell me more about your culture, how your culture feels about mental health awareness practice through therapeutic medicine?
Sure. I think my culture, as a white American, I think it's very split. I think that there's a lot of people, white men, who view mental health as a significant issue. And I think that on the other hand, there's an equal amount, maybe not exactly equal, but who dismiss it, or whatever, or maybe view physical health, view it as coming before mental health. So yeah.
Okay. Thank you for that. For our next question, do you use any traditional medical treatments from your culture? An example of that would be maybe, say, herbal medicine or anything like that. If so, could you provide me with an example?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I can't really think of anything specific to my culture, whatever that is.
Right.
Yeah, I can't think of any traditional medical practices.
Thank you. So we have two more. What are the greatest limitations your culture experiences regarding the access to healthcare services?
I think that the biggest barrier to accessing healthcare for white Americans, and really everyone, I think, is just cost. So yeah.
Okay. I agree with that. For our last question, what are some adverse implications people in your culture experience as a result of limited access to healthcare services?
I don't think that people in my culture experience significant difficulties in accessing healthcare, but I think when factors like cost and location, in rural areas in particular, prevent people from accessing healthcare, then you can obviously see how that could be harmful, when people can't get healthcare based on location and cost.
Okay. And is there anything specific that comes to your mind? Like, say any specific cases or anything? Just out of curiosity.
Yeah, I think I remember this case where this guy couldn't afford, I think it was a guy in his 20s, he couldn't afford an inhaler, right? And he had to choose between rent and an inhaler and purchasing an inhaler for his asthma. And he chose rent, and he actually ended up dying. So, yeah.
Well, thank you for this information. I think we're going to go ahead and conclude this interview for today.
Awesome.
Okay. Can't really reach it. Sorry.